The moment I stepped into our new home, I knew something was off. The realtor had called it a steal, but now I understood why. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the house itself was breathing. "Honey, isn't it perfect?" my wife Sarah exclaimed, her eyes glittering with excitement. I forced a smile, not wanting to dampen her enthusiasm. "Yeah, it's great," I lied, my gaze drawn to a dark stain on the ceiling. As we unpacked, the house seemed to watch us. Floorboards creaked when no one was walking, and shadows danced in my peripheral vision. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, fueled by the stress of moving. That first night, we fell into an exhausted sleep. I jolted awake at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding. The bedroom was freezing, our breath visible in the moonlight. Sarah stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, clutching my arm. Before I could respond, a child's laughter echoed through the house. We froze, listening intently. We had no children. "It's probably just the neighbors," I reasoned, but my voice trembled. The laughter came again, closer this time, followed by the patter of small feet in the hallway. Sarah's nails dug into my skin as we stared at our closed bedroom door. Slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I leapt out of bed, yanking the door open. The hallway was empty, silent, and dark. But as I turned back to Sarah, a small handprint appeared on the mirror behind her, as if pressed from the other side. Days passed, and the incidents escalated. Objects moved on their own. Whispers filled empty rooms. Sarah found her grandmother's locket, lost years ago, sitting on the kitchen counter one morning. "This house is trying to tell us something," she said, her face pale. I wanted to dismiss it, to find logical explanations, but I couldn't deny the growing dread in my gut. We started researching the house's history. The library's microfiche revealed a grim past. In 1973, the entire Wilkins family disappeared without a trace. Before them, 3 other families had fled the property, citing unexplainable phenomena. As I read the articles, a chill ran down my spine. Each family had reported the same things we were experiencing, and worse. That night, as we lay in bed discussing our findings, the temperature plummeted. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. "John?" Sarah's voice quivered. "I can't move." I tried to reach for her, but my body was paralyzed. A weight pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. In the darkness, I could make out a figure standing at the foot of our bed. It was a little girl, no more than 7 years old. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were black voids. She smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Welcome home," she said, her voice a mixture of childish glee and ancient malevolence. "We've been waiting for you." The pressure on my chest intensified. I struggled to speak, to move, to do anything. Sarah whimpered beside me. Suddenly, the girl was on top of me, her face inches from mine. "You can't leave," she hissed. "No one ever leaves." As quickly as it began, it was over. The lights flickered back on, and we could move again. Sarah and I clung to each other, shaking. "We have to get out of here," I gasped. We threw some clothes into a bag and ran for the car. As I turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtered and died. I tried again and again, but it wouldn't start. Looking up, I saw the little girl standing in our bedroom window, waving. Dozens of other faces peered out from the other windows, men, women, children, all with the same hollow eyes and sharp-toothed grins. "What do we do?" Sarah sobbed. Before I could answer, a deep, resonant voice filled the car. "There is no escape. This is your home now. Forever." The car doors locked themselves. The windows began to fog, obscuring our view of the house. As the mist thickened, spectral hands pressed against the glass from the outside. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call for help, but the screen showed no signal. The hands on the windows began to push through, incorporeal fingers reaching for us. Sarah screamed as one brushed against her cheek. I batted at them frantically, but my hands passed right through. "John," Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Look." I turned to see the house transforming before our eyes. The cheerful yellow paint darkened to a rotting gray. Windows shattered and reformed. The entire structure seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a giant lung. A guttural growl emanated from the earth itself, and the ground began to shake. Cracks appeared in the driveway, spreading rapidly toward our car. "Hold on," I yelled, trying the ignition one last time. To my shock, the engine roared to life. I slammed the car into reverse just as a chasm opened where we had been parked. As I sped down the street, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house was receding, but the little girl stood in the middle of the road, watching us go. Her laughter filled my head. "You'll be back," her voice whispered. "They always come back." We drove through the night, putting as much distance between us and that house as possible. But as the sun began to rise, dread settled in my stomach. The roads looked familiar. Too familiar. "John," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "I think we're going in circles." I slammed on the brakes. There, at the end of the street, stood our house. Pristine. Welcoming. As if nothing had happened. The little girl was on the porch, waving at us. "Welcome home," her voice echoed in my mind. "We've missed you." Sarah grabbed my arm. "John, what do we do?" I stared at the house, my mind racing. There had to be a way out, a way to break whatever hold this place had on us. But as I watched, the front door swung open invitingly. Maybe, I started, an idea forming. Maybe we need to confront it. Find out what it wants. Sarah looked at me like I was insane. "Are you serious? After everything that just happened?" I took a deep breath. "Do you see any other options? We can't keep running if it's just going to bring us back here." She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay. But we stick together, no matter what." Hand in hand, we stepped out of the car. The little girl's smile widened as we approached the house. "Brave," she giggled. "Or foolish. Come in, come in. There's so much to show you." As we crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us. The house seemed to sigh, settling around us. "Now," the girl said, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "Let's begin." The walls began to ripple, revealing glimpses of other times, other lives. I saw families laughing, crying, screaming. I saw violence and love, birth and death, all playing out in this very house. "Do you understand yet?" the girl asked, her voice echoing strangely. This house is more than wood and nails. It's a nexus, a gathering point for all the pain and joy and fear that humans experience. Sarah's hand tightened in mine. "What does that make you?" she asked. The girl's form flickered, becoming an old man, then a young woman, then a teenager. "We are the echoes, the remnants. Trapped here, feeding the house, becoming part of it. And you want us to join you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The being laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Want? No. But need? Yes. The house must be fed. The cycle must continue." As it spoke, I felt a pull, an urge to let go, to sink into the walls and become one with the house. Sarah swayed beside me, her eyes glazing over. "No," I said firmly, grabbing her shoulders. "We're not giving in. There has to be another way." The being's face twisted in anger. "There is no other way. You are ours now." The house began to shake, pictures falling from walls, furniture sliding across floors. A wind whipped through the rooms, carrying whispers and screams. I held on to Sarah, my mind racing. There had to be a solution, a way to break free from this nightmare. As the chaos intensified around us, I desperately searched for an answer, knowing that our very souls hung in the balance. The being that was once a little girl loomed over us, its form shifting and growing. "Your resistance is admirable," it hissed, "but futile. Generations have tried to escape, to change their fate. All have failed." The being paused, curiosity overtaking its rage. "Explain," it demanded. I looked at Sarah, seeing determination replace fear in her eyes. She squeezed my hand and faced the entity. "You said this house is a nexus of human experience," she began. "But you're trapping that energy, feeding off it. What if we could release it instead?" The house shuddered, as if considering her words. I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a lightening of the oppressive weight that had been pressing down on us. "Go on," the being said, its form flickering uncertainly. I caught on to Sarah's idea. "All this pain, this fear, this joy, it's meant to be experienced, to flow through the world. By trapping it here, you're disrupting the natural order." The walls rippled again, but this time the images seemed clearer, more alive. I saw moments of pure happiness alongside deep sorrow, all swirling together in a tapestry of human existence. "We could help," Sarah said softly. "Not by becoming part of the house, but by helping to release what's been trapped here. To let these experiences and emotions return to the world where they belong." The being was silent, its form continuously shifting as if unsure of itself. The house creaked and groaned around us, but it felt different now, less menacing, more expectant. "It's been so long," the entity finally whispered, its voice a chorus of all those trapped within. "We've forgotten what it's like to be part of the world. To feel without consuming." I took a cautious step forward. "Let us help. Show us how to release what's been trapped here." The being regarded us for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It will not be easy," it warned. "The house has grown accustomed to its power. It may fight us." As if on cue, the floor beneath our feet began to undulate. Shadows deepened in the corners of the room, reaching out with grasping tendrils. "We have to try," I said, bracing myself against the rising chaos. "For everyone trapped here, and for ourselves." Sarah nodded in agreement, her face set with determination. Where do we start? The being's form settled, becoming the little girl again. But now, I could see the weariness in her eyes, the weight of countless years. We start, she said, extending her hand, by remembering. By facing every joy and sorrow, every triumph and tragedy that these walls have witnessed. Are you ready? As Sarah and I reached out to take her hand, the house seemed to hold its breath. We stood on the precipice of something monumental, something that could change not just our fate, but the fate of all those who had been trapped here. We're ready, we said in unison. The little girl smiled, a genuine smile this time, free of malice. Then let the unraveling begin. The world around us exploded into a kaleidoscope of memories and emotions. We were swept up in a torrent of experiences, each more intense than the last. Through it all, we held tight to each other and to the promise of freedom. As we delved deeper into the house's history, I couldn't help but wonder, would we be strong enough to see this through? And if we succeeded in freeing the trapped souls, what would become of the house and of us? The answers lay ahead, waiting to be discovered in the layers of memory and emotion that made up this nexus of human experience. All we could do was press on, hoping that our determination would be enough to break the cycle and find a way out of this true new house horror story. As we plunged deeper into the house's memories, the world around us became a swirling vortex of emotion and experience. I felt the joy of newlyweds crossing the threshold, the grief of families torn apart by tragedy, the terror of those who had faced the house's malevolence before us. Each memory hit like a physical blow, threatening to overwhelm my senses. Sarah's hand tightened in mine, anchoring me to reality. "Stay with me, John," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of past lives. The little girl or the entity that had taken her form led us through the maelstrom. "Every memory must be acknowledged," she explained. "Every emotion honored. Only then can they be released." We moved from room to room, each space holding its own horrors and wonders. In the kitchen, I felt the warmth of family dinners and the icy grip of a mother's despair as she realized her child was missing. The living room pulsed with the echoes of laughter and the suffocating silence of loneliness. As we climbed the stairs, the air grew thick and oppressive. "This is where it began," the girl said, her voice taking on an otherworldly resonance. "Where the first tragedy occurred, binding the house to the realm of spirits." The master bedroom door swung open of its own accord, revealing a scene from another time. A man stood by the window, his face contorted with rage. A woman cowered in the corner, pleading. "Please, Edward," she begged. "It wasn't what you think." I watched in horror as the man lunged forward, his hands closing around the woman's throat. Sarah tried to intervene, but her hands passed right through them. "We can't change the past," the girl explained solemnly. "We can only witness and release." As the scene faded, I felt the room fill with a suffocating guilt and anger. The emotions were so strong, I fell to my knees, gasping for air. "John," Sarah cried, kneeling beside me. I looked up to see dark tendrils of energy seeping from the walls, reaching for us. The house was fighting back, trying to maintain its hold on the trapped souls. "We have to keep going," I managed to say, struggling to my feet. "We can't let it win." We pressed on, moving from room to room, confronting the layers of history trapped within the house. Each memory we faced seemed to loosen the house's grip, but also made it more desperate to hold on. In the attic, we encountered the most terrifying scene yet. Dozens of ghostly figures huddled in the cramped space, their eyes wide with fear. Among them, I recognized faces from the old newspaper articles, the missing Wilkins family, the others who had fled in terror. "They've been here all along," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. The little girl nodded. Trapped between worlds, feeding the house with their fear and despair. As we watched, the ghostly figures began to notice us. Their expressions changed from fear to hope, and they reached out with translucent hands. "Help us," they pleaded, their voices a haunting chorus. "Set us free." I felt a surge of determination. "How do we do it?" I asked the girl. She looked at me with ancient eyes. "You must take their place." My heart dropped. "What?" "The house requires souls to sustain it," she explained. "If you choose to free them, you must offer yourselves in exchange." Sarah and I looked at each other, the weight of the decision heavy between us. Could we sacrifice ourselves for strangers? But then, weren't we all connected in this web of human experience? Before we could respond, the house shuddered violently. The walls began to bleed a thick, black substance, and a deep, guttural growl filled the air. "It knows what we're planning," the girl said urgently. "You must decide quickly." The black ooze began to take shape, forming into a monstrous figure that loomed over us. It had no distinct features, just a gaping maw and countless writhing tendrils. "You are mine," it roared, its voice shaking the very foundations of the house. In that moment, I knew what we had to do. I met Sarah's gaze and saw the same resolve in her eyes. "We'll do it," I said firmly. "We'll take their place." The girl nodded solemnly. "Then let it be done." She raised her hands, and a blinding light filled the attic. I felt a tugging sensation, as if my very essence was being pulled from my body. The trapped souls began to glow, their forms becoming more solid as Sarah and I faded. The monstrous manifestation of the house held in rage, lashing out with its tendrils. But each time it struck, it passed through us, our corporeal forms already dissipating. As the light intensified, I saw the ghostly figures begin to move. They walked past us, offering grateful smiles and whispered thanks. With each soul that left, I felt myself becoming more rooted to the house, as if I was sinking into the very woodwork. Sarah's hand in mine was the only thing that felt real anymore. "I love you," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "I love you too," I replied, watching as the last of the trapped souls faded away. As our transformation neared completion, the house gave one final, earth-shattering roar. The walls shook, windows shattered, and for a moment, I thought the entire structure would collapse. Then, suddenly, everything went still. We stood in the attic, but everything looked different. The world had a hazy, dreamlike quality to it. I could see through the walls to the rooms below, and beyond that, to the very bones of the house. "It's done," the girl said, but her voice sounded distant now. "You've freed them. What happens now?" Sarah asked, her form shimmering beside me. The girl smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Now, you guard this place. You ensure that it never traps another soul. And perhaps, in time, you'll find your own way to move on." With that, she faded away, leaving Sarah and I alone in our new reality. One night, as we stood on the porch watching the moon rise, Sarah turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Giving up our lives for this?" I considered the question carefully. We had lost so much: our physical forms, our chance at a normal life. But we had gained something too. A purpose. A way to protect others from the fate we had narrowly escaped. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. We're still together, and we're doing something important. That's enough for me. Sarah smiled, her form glowing softly in the moonlight. It's enough for me too. As we turned back to the house, our house now, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had faced unimaginable horrors and come out the other side. We had transformed a place of terror into one of protection. Our story wasn't over, not really. As long as the house stood, we would be here, standing guard against the darkness. It wasn't the life we had planned, but it was a life with meaning. And as I felt the warmth of Sarah's presence beside me, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The house creaked softly, as if sighing in contentment. The malevolence that had once permeated every board and nail was gone, replaced by something gentler. Not quite benevolence, but a neutral energy that we could shape and guide. But our vigilance never wavered. We knew that the potential for darkness still lurked in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness. The house had been changed, but not completely transformed. It was up to us to maintain the delicate balance we had created. Years passed, and the world outside changed. We watched through windows as cars became sleeker, as children grew up with devices we could scarcely comprehend. Through it all, our house stood as a constant, a bridge between past and present. There were moments of temptation, times when the longing for our old lives became almost unbearable. We would feel the pull of the beyond, the whisper of whatever lay waiting after this existence. But each time, we chose to stay, renewing our commitment to our self-appointed task. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I felt a shift in the house's energy. It was subtle, but after so long, I had become attuned to its every nuance. "Sarah," I called, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. "Do you feel that?" She materialized beside me, her expression concerned. "Yes. Something's changing." We moved through the house, searching for the source of the disturbance. As we entered the attic, the place where our transformation had occurred, we found our answer. The air shimmered, and a familiar figure appeared. The little girl who had guided us through our ordeal stood before us, but she looked different now. The weight of ages had lifted from her eyes, and she smiled warmly. "You've done well," she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of eons. "You've maintained the balance far longer than any before you." "What's happening?" Sarah asked, moving closer to me. The girl's form flickered, becoming more translucent. "The house no longer needs guardians. You've transformed it completely, purged the last of its malevolence. Your task is complete." I felt a surge of emotions: relief, excitement, and a touch of fear. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," the girl said gently, "that you're free to move on. If you choose." Sarah and I looked at each other, decades of unspoken communication passing between us in an instant. We had been prepared to guard this house for eternity, but now, faced with the possibility of release, I realized how ready I was for the next step in our journey. "What about the house?" Sarah asked. "Will it be safe?" The girl nodded. "The work you've done has fundamentally changed its nature. It will stand as a sanctuary now, a place of peace for all who dwell within it. I took Sarah's hand, feeling the familiar warmth despite our incorporeal forms. "Are you ready?" I asked. She squeezed my hand. "As long as we're together." We turned back to the girl, who held out her hands to us. As we reached for her, I felt the house one last time not as a prison or a responsibility, but as an old friend bidding us farewell. "Thank you," I whispered, to the girl, to the house, to whatever cosmic force had set us on this path. As our hands touched the girl's, a brilliant light engulfed us. I felt the last tethers to the physical world fall away, and a sense of profound peace washed over me. Sarah's presence was still there, a constant as we moved towards whatever awaited us. The light grew brighter, and I caught one last glimpse of the house, our house, before it faded from view. In that final moment, I saw not the site of our greatest fears, but the place where we had found our greatest purpose. Then, we were moving on, hand in hand, into a new adventure. The true horror story of our new house had come to an end, transformed by love, sacrifice, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Whatever lay ahead, I knew that Sarah and I would face it together, just as we always had. As we faded from the earthly plane, the house settled into its new existence. The walls that had once trapped souls now stood as silent witnesses to the power of redemption. And if, on quiet nights, new residents thought they heard whispers of comfort or felt a gentle, protective presence, they would smile, feeling inexplicably at peace in their home. Our story, the tale of the house that had been a horror and became a haven, would live on not as a ghost story told to frighten, but as a legend of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest places, light can prevail.